local political scandal that has now turned national. It doesn't make Las Vegas or Nevada look good. There's no question about that. There's no positives when it comes to this story at all. Even if you're a Republican, it shouldn't be a positive to you. This is just a very embarrassing situation for Steven Horsford, his family, those who voted for him, his supporters. It goes on and on. It's also an embarrassing situation for this Love Jones. Doesn't certainly make her look good either.
Yeah, but she doesn't care, Brian.
But it's a bad situation all around, and especially for Democrats. And a lady we have with us on the line right now, she's running against Steven Horsford in District 4 as a Democrat. Her name is Gabrielle Dare. Gabrielle, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Hey, what's up, Gabrielle?
I'm well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you guys today.
Sure. I have to ask you this to start off. What went through your mind? What was your first reaction when you heard about the Steven Horsford scandal?
Honestly, it was, oh, God, here we go again. Now what's happened?
Explain what you mean by that, because this isn't the first time, for those of you that may not know, that the state of Nevada has had to deal with a politician with a sex scandal. Tell us a little bit about what you mean by that.
Well, I'm not even focusing on the fact that it's a sex scandal, if that's what we're calling it. CD4 started in 2012. The first representative was Mr. Horsford, followed by Mr. Hardy, then Mr. Kewen, and then Mr. Horsford again. And with Mr. Hardy, we had the alleged illegal use of campaign funds. With Mr. Kewen, we definitely had issues of a sexual nature, shall we call it. And now with Mr. Horsford, again, there's a situation that has put him in the public press, and it just creates doubt in the minds of voters about what these folks have been doing with their time when they should have been serving people in Nevada.
Do you think he should resign?
I'm not going to call for him to resign, because this is not a matter for me to decide. This is a matter for the voters to decide on whether or not they feel he's the best person to represent him. But as far as I'm aware, from the information that I've seen, he hasn't actually done anything illegal.
All right, so let's talk about that. There are some Republicans, as you know, that are running against Steven Horsford that are calling for his resignation. And here's my opinion on this, and you could tell me whether you agree or disagree. If it didn't affect his job, if he didn't use his own staff to help this woman and her family, then I agree with you. I don't think he should be forced to resign. But what if, and I say what if, there is an investigation and it finds that he used members of his staff to help this woman and help her son, then would you feel differently?
Possibly. Obviously, I would have to see the results of the investigation. I would have to see the evidence, and I would hope that me, along with everybody else, that district he represents in that district, would review that with an open mind. It has to be about facts in that case.
I agree. No, I completely agree with you. We're on the same board, same page there. But here's the issue. It's a few weeks out, right? We got several weeks, and then we're going to find out if Horsford is still in office or not. So, if there is an investigation, I would think that it would take a lot more time than a few weeks. And you got all these Republicans that are saying demanding an investigation. Well, how are you going to get a thorough investigation in this short period of time, Gabrielle, right? That's my way of thinking right now.
Well, you're absolutely not. I think you make a valid point there. And it's unfortunate, the timing of this, quite frankly. I don't think anyone's particularly thrilled with that. It has certainly created a sense of discomfort for voters because they don't have all the information. And I think it was, again, I've expressed disappointment in a personal statement I made, which was separate from the press release that I sent. Yeah. And, we don't have all the information. We don't have enough information to really make a solid decision. And the other thing, of course, we all have to bear in mind that we're in the middle of a pandemic. People have lost their jobs. People are worried about the well-being of their family and themselves. And just the timing is awful. And it's just another situation where we have a scandal of sorts that is taking away from the business that our elected representatives are supposed to do.
I agree, and that's well said. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Gabrielle Dare. She is a Democrat running against Horsford in District 4. Of course, we're talking about the scandal. Horsford admitting to having a sexual affair with another woman over the course, a span of a decade on and off. As you know, Horsford has kids, and he's married. Okay, so I'm not, Gabrielle, I'm not defending Steven Horsford. I think this is disgusting. It's disgusting even if you're not a politician. Nobody should cheat on their spouse. I understand that people are not perfect, but when you're an elected official, you're representing a lot of people in this state. So I'm not defending Horsford in any way, shape, or form. I want to make that very clear. With that being said, I'm making the statement that you have all these Republicans on the right, many of them going after Horsford for having an affair, which we know did happen. But where were all these Republicans when Donald Trump paid Stormy Daniels $120,000? Where were all these Republicans defending women when Donald Trump was attacking Nancy Pelosi on her looks? Where were all these Republicans then? And my point is this. I don't believe you have any credibility as a human being in this situation if you're one of those people that's going after Horsford but have never called out Trump for the way he's treated women, not only the last 4 years, but his entire life. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, I would agree with it. There does seem to be a pattern of men in power and their relationships with women. But if it's wrong, it should be wrong for everybody.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It should be wrong for everybody. And I think, certainly what Horsford has done, it's an embarrassment. How do you see this thing playing out? Being in politics yourself and running against him, do you think that this could be the end all for Steven Horsford? Do you think that this scandal could get him out of politics for good, or do you see it that he has enough support that it won't affect him? I mean, how do you see this thing playing out, Gabrielle?
Well, it's a bit uncertain, though. Like you said earlier, there's not really time to do an investigation. And without an investigation, there's not actually any evidence of wrongdoing. There are some concerning statements that Ms. Linder made in her comments about getting introductions for jobs and being taken care of.
Right.
And I think that those may merit an investigation. And, of course, there's the video where he's clearly used his staff to do this. Right. And the reason, and I said this in my press release, because one of the reasons that really bothers me is that a group of people that I was involved in, I was there as a veteran, there were environmentalists, and also there was the former chairman of the Moapa Band of Paiutes, and we were there to protest the military expansion into the Desert National Wildlife Refuge. And obviously that is in D-4, so we wanted to speak to Mr. Horsford. Sure. And the initial meeting was canceled, and then it was set back, and then we all sat around waiting for him while he was in committee. Now, that's his job. I don't really have a problem with him being in committee and doing the job that he was elected to do. But it was the fact that there was all of this waiting going on, and Mr. Anderson, who had spent his own money to travel to D.C. and be a part of this discussion because it was very impactful for the Moapa Band of Paiutes, didn't actually get to speak to Mr. Horsford. I ended up having to put him in a cab and send him to the airport so he didn't miss his flight home.
My goodness.
And actually, we missed him by literally 5 minutes because I went back in after putting him into a taxi, and Mr. Horsford was speaking to the rest of the group in the hallway right outside of the committee hearing room. But Mr. Anderson also missed out on speaking with Congresswoman Lee because he waited in Mr. Horsford's offices for an opportunity to speak to him. And when something like this happens, you're like, well, why? Like I said earlier, it puts doubt into the minds of constituents because anytime there is a scandal of any sort or an urgent priority, it takes up headspace. It takes time to deal with, putting out fires or whatever needs to be done. And it doesn't even matter if it's an illegal scandal. If there is an urgent issue coming up, it takes precedence, and all of your resources are about dealing with that and taking care of that situation. So, what was Mr. Horsford doing in the times that he should have been dealing with constituents? Is there an impact? And we don't know. We don't know the answer. I don't want to be unfair here. We don't know the answer. But that was what I thought of when I read about the fact that he'd done this video and then I saw it. Now, this is not everybody's opinion. Some people think, well, he was just doing outreach, and also that is part of his job. We just don't really have enough information.
And Gabrielle, we actually had a couple of his your Republican opponents on the show, Sam Peters and Lisa Song-Sut, and they basically both told us that he is more of an absentee placeholder for the Democratic Party. He's very hard to get a hold of. No one really, his constituents don't really see him in person, and he's also not a resident of the state of Nevada. Is that more or less true in your opinion?
Well, I did try myself to get on some of his town halls for COVID-19. I was never able to do them. They don't seem to have gone forward, but I could have just been accessing them at the wrong time. I have heard similar things from constituents. I've heard similar things of that nature from folks here in Nevada. I obviously did get an opportunity to speak to him, but I have heard them, and I'll leave it at that.
And I will just say, from a producer standpoint, I have tried several times to get Representative Horsford on the show and didn't even so much as receive a reply from his office, for what it's worth.
I get fundraising emails from him.
I bet you do. I got that from Donald Trump, and I'm not much of a Trump supporter. But, Gabrielle, I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about your campaign. I appreciate you, being forthcoming and answering our questions to Steven Horsford. But tell us why, in your opinion, people should vote for. What do you stand for, and how do you differ from Steven Horsford?
Well, I'll be honest, it was actually a difficult decision for me to even get into the race. I am a Democrat. I am the first vice chair for the Clark County Democratic Party, and there really does have to be a solid reason that you are going to go up against an incumbent Democrat. And the only viable reason that I believe in is that you feel they're not doing the job as well as they could. And that's where I came down, because all of a sudden we're in the middle of a pandemic, and this representative doesn't support universal health care. In the middle of a pandemic, doesn't support universal health care and won't be swayed. Yeah. And that's a concern, because I'm sure you're aware of the entrance polls for Nevada.
Yep.
Nevadans want universal health care. It's one of the biggest issues, that and public lands, which has got to be the single unifying issue in Nevada.
No question.
These are important. These are important. And I just felt that in the middle of a pandemic, it was unconscionable to send someone to Congress that doesn't represent the people in NVO4 who clearly want health care. And it's different in different places, because, in the urban areas, in North Las Vegas, it's about people not being able to get health care because they don't have insurance, or they don't have the money to pay for insurance premiums or that sort of thing. In the rurals, it's more about not being able to go anywhere and get care. They don't have places to go. In Lincoln County, I've heard from folks there, they go to Utah.
That's pathetic.
Utah.
Yeah, that's pathetic.
If they don't deal with it themselves, they go to Utah. And I think that's ludicrous.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree 100%.
Absolutely ludicrous. So,
I can call it.
That was the defining point. But I have already been advocating and lobbying for public lands. Obviously, I told you about the trip I did in D.C. for the Desert National Wildlife Refuge. And it's not limited to that. I've also been to D.C. for endangered species and other public lands. I've worked with Pew Trust, the Natural Resources Development Council. So, this is a big thing for me.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I got to be honest with you. You sound like an extremely intelligent lady with experience, and I think we need somebody representing District 4. I think that has better representation than Steven Horsford, and especially when it comes to what's taken place here over the last several days. Gabrielle, we got to take a break, but I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come on. I wish you the best of luck in a few weeks, and appreciate you coming on. And good luck to you. Thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Gabrielle.
My pleasure. Thank you. Stay safe, guys.
Yeah. Thank you. Same to you and your family. That's Gabrielle Dare, a Democrat running against Horsford in District 4. Very open and honest, and, criticizing Steven Horsford, which I appreciate. Anybody within the same party lines that can be critical of others, because it's not necessarily the most intelligent, I shouldn't say intelligent, maybe the most politically savvy thing to do. But she did it, and I appreciate her for that. I wish more Republicans would do that when it comes to other Republicans in office.